There is no more unhealthy being, no man less worthy of respect than he who either really holds or feigns to hold. An attitude of sneering disbelief toward all that is great and lofty.
What led you in 2006 to begin your journey in MMA?
Your winner and the new light welterweight title holder, Paul Reed.
So I started training probably when I was 33. I trained for a couple of years and then I started fighting professionally. I was just like going out getting drunk, just like out doing stupid things all the time, and not really living a good life. And then my daughter was born when I was 30, and I think that's what refocused me. I used to smoke like 30 cigarettes a day. I was drinking a lot. I started smoking, I started training, and I started fighting professionally.
To hide from others and from themselves in their own. The road is easy. There is none easier, save only the rule of the man who sneers alike at both criticism and performance.
I think Matt Brown had talked about this, where it's just like, he's like, I'm gonna retire, I'm not going out there. Like, anxiety would be so peaked right before a fight.
You know, there's such a hard thing to deal with, the anxiety and the stress and it's the fear of failure, isn't it? You know, it's a big fear of failure rather than being worried about getting hurt. It's the fear of looking bad in front of people, your peers. And so I become, the older I got, I think I got more mentally strong or more structured in how I deal with it. The lead up, getting to the venue, having your hands wrapped, all that stuff is the tough bit. As soon as my music would come on, and I got that far, and my music's coming on and I'm walking out, I'll get like goosebumps, my hair will be standing on end. That's when I'd be excited. That's when I'd feel, right, actually I really want to do this. I think for me, fighting when I was 48, and I dislocated my elbow in like 5 months before in a fight, and dislocated it really badly. It took them a long time to get back in, and so that was a bad one because like I felt it go, and I was still trying to figure out how to win the fight, but my arm is literally just hanging by my side.
That's nasty. You can see what we're seeing. Reed's left arm looks like it's completely out of place.
I'm going to put this out.
That was a tough one. I came back from that and fought 5 months later. He was a lot younger. He looked like even when he lost, he looked like he'd done a really good job. And so he just took his back straight away.
As Paul Reed finishes off the young 26-year-old in handy fashion.
That for me was probably one of the best times I fought in terms of my performance.
What would you say was your hardest loss? The loss that just kind of sticks with you?
I got TKO'd in like about 25 seconds, I think. I went up to Edinburgh, which is my hometown. So I had like family in the crowd. And that was the worst ever. I remember I stayed in bed for a week after that, just really upset. That was a tough one to take. But then you have to come back stronger, and you have to find a way through it. You have to learn from those experiences, so that never happens again.
Last one, 50.
50 was my last one.
You had your last one at 50?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think I just did it for like a 50th birthday present for myself.
The Patina'd podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Patina'd podcast. I'm excited to have on Paul Reed. So for my normal listeners or regular listeners, whoever does the viewing on YouTube. I appreciate you guys. A little bit of a different background here. We have rain, which we're not used to here in Northern California. And normally my studio is in a shipping container, so the rain sounds like rocks on this microphone. So having to do this in home. So we're going to maybe have to deal with some kids in the background, but hopefully it won't be too much of an interruption today. But yeah, very excited to have my guest, Paul Reed, on. Paul is a mixed martial artist with a 25-13 record, originally from Scotland, and currently the head coach of Sweat Box MMA in the UK in Bristol, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well. High caliber boxer, as I've seen within the video, some good boxing technique and rolling.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, man, I'm really excited to have you on. I first became aware of you because there's a video of you going around where you're in your late 40s competing in MMA. I'm like, okay, well, what is this about? And I started researching you. I'm like, okay, well, this guy's got to have some input on longevity and how to continue to, push himself and challenge himself and not just kind of fade into the sunset and just kind of do nothing. And so that's why I originally reached out to you, and it's been a while, but we're able to figure this out. So I'm glad to have you on, Paul.
Glad to be on.
I guess what we can get directly into is I could see I did some researching, and so we're going to talk about some of this according to your MMA career and stuff, and then maybe talk about some other things. But what led you in 2006 to begin your journey in MMA?
Do you know, such a long way around it, but I'd only just really become aware of MMA maybe just a few years before this, not that many years before I started actually competing. I can remember watching, there was a thing on the news and they were talking about mixed martial arts, so they called it cage fighting. Mm-hmm. And then I can remember watching it thinking, like, whoever did that must be just stupid or crazy, because it just looked so crazy. And I used to box and I used to do judo. So when I seen that, I thought they looked like thugs. And I think I must have dismissed it in my head. And then there's a station we used to have over in the UK called Bravo. It used to be on cable TV. And they would show the UFC on Sunday night. And they would show it so it'd be on in the States on Saturday, and they would re-show it, just the main card on Sunday evenings. And I started watching that. And I become really, really like fascinated with the sport. I'd always been into boxing, like a massive boxing fan. And I'd done some boxing when I was younger, and I'd done some judo. And then watching the guys at that level doing it, it just looked so interesting. And I like the way that, the techniques, how they wrestled, the submissions. And it was like people like Matt Hughes fighting like Frank Trigg. Mm-hmm. Don't know if you can remember back in those days. Yeah. Chuck Liddell was knocking everyone out. Mm-hmm. And I watched these fights, and I become a little bit obsessed with the sport. So I started training probably when I was 33. And I trained for a couple of years, and then I started fighting professionally. Wow! I think when I started training, I was already pretty good from boxing when I was younger and from doing judo. But I kind of gone away from both those sports. I done boxing when I was 14, mainly to get me out of trouble, because I used to get into a lot of fights when I was a kid, and I think they found a way to just me to focus my energies on, or focus my aggression in. And then I stopped boxing and I started judo when I was in my early 20s. And then I went away from that completely. And I was just like going out, getting drunk, just like out doing stupid things all the time, and not really living a good life. I wasn't very focused. And then my daughter was born when I was 30. And I think that's what refocused me. And then I wanted to get fit. And I used to smoke like 30 cigarettes a day. I was drinking a lot. So I stopped smoking. I carried on drinking. I stopped smoking. I started training, and I started fighting professionally. And I thought maybe I'd have one fight just to tick off the list. It's like it's something like I really always wanted to do. And once I did it one time and I won, I just thought, all right, I'm gonna have to do that to see if that was lucky. And then after that, I just become like really, really driven with it. And then that's all I wanted to do.
So at this time, was your training just kind of periodic, or were you taking it super serious at the beginning, or were you just kind of like, what was the training like at the beginning?
The training was just like me and a friend would go down to I'd use a few gyms. I'd always go like to different boxing gyms. I'd go to an MMA gym, but it was like we'd have to put the mats down. It'd be twice a week. And so really I started focusing on with just my friend I would train with, and we'd go to a gym, we'd put all the mats down ourselves, we just spar each other, you know. And I was just doing it like that, and then just because I already sort of knew how to box. And when I started at this MMA gym for a little bit, one of the guys was losing all his fights, and I was trying to help him with his boxing. And we went to a live show. We went to a show to corner him. And then when I seen the guys fighting, I just thought I could beat some of them, you know. So I asked the promoter to get me a fight. And then, so really, it wasn't as it is now, where you could go to MMA gym and everyone sort of it's teaching you really good technique right from the start. You'd have to sort of learn a lot of stuff yourself, and you'd have to figure out yourself. So I think people have it like it's amazing now, the sport, the amount of coaches now, and the way it's done. Back in the day, back in 2006, it was like a lot different.
Yeah.
So you're like really like you're making up some of it yourself, and you're figuring out yourself. And then it was just like my first fight was like a proper fight, you know, rather than like I think I become really emotional in the fight. It was more like just a real fight rather than like a sport. You know? And I think after that I realized I'd have to treat it more as a sport, and like understand cardio better, understand how to the technique a little bit better. I remember the first time I did it, it was so nerve-wracking. You know, so nerve-wracking to get in there. It's like, because it was so much of a new thing to do. Like now there's so many fights, you can watch so many fights, you can speak to different people. But back then it was like a sort of really new thing where I was from. And to get in there, it's like I felt like I was really going into the sort of untested waters, and I didn't really know what was going to happen. You know, so I was just training mainly with my friend. Like, but I was training a lot, and I was training really hard. And I was training just every day.
You speak to the how is nerve-wracking. Is it any less nerve-wracking toward the latter part of your career, like at the beginning of fights? Because I've heard I think Matt Brown had talked about this, where it's just like he's like, I'm going to retire. I'm not going out there. Like his anxiety would be so peaked right before a fight.
Do you know, that's such a hard thing to deal with, the anxiety and the stress and it's a fear of failure, isn't it? You know, it's a big fear of failure rather than being worried about getting hurt. It's a fear of looking bad in front of people, your peers. And so I become, the older I got, I think I got more mentally strong or more structured in how I deal with it. So to start with, I would just be like a bag of nerves. And I'd be a bag of nerves from weeks before. I'd be dreaming about it. The day of it, I'd feel sick all day, you know. And I'd like tell myself I'm never doing this again. I've said I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it, but I'm never going to do it again. And then the next day, I'll be like trying to like organize another one, you know. But for my last few fights, like a much elder age, I think I realized the nerves are never going to go away. But what I can do is I can manage them so much better. So I would just not even think about the fight. I would train. So every time I got nervous and would worry if I'm going to win or lose, I just train and just prepare better. And then I'd focus on the preparation and me performing well and trying my hardest. So I thought, anything in life, if you go, you know, you can be really nervous about anything you're going to do. But if you focus mainly on like how hard you're going to try and trying to make sure you perform really well, then that's going to take care of the winning or losing, rather than you like thinking about it. Am I going to win? What if I lose? Stressing yourself out to the point where maybe you can't pull the trigger, or you get stage fright. Or I've seen a lot of guys who are really, really skillful with amazing skills lose a lot of fights just from they can't deal with the intensity and the pressure of the situation. So I think learning how to deal with that is just a massive thing.
Yeah, I kind of who was it? I'm trying to remember the name. Gosh, man, it's right on the tip of my tongue, and I can't remember the the guy's name. He was a young fighter in the UFC, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. David Terrell, just
Yeah, yeah,
dominating folks. And then Evan Tanner got a hold of him,
yeah. I
and
remember that fight.
it was, and so it always made me think, like, before Evan Tanner ended his career, essentially, just mentally it destroyed him. But it always made me think how fragile he was before any other fight prior to that. Like how fragile he must have been, like on the cusp before he actually got out there in the ring and realized, oh, I belong here.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then when he went against Evan Tanner, he's like, oh no, I don't belong in here. That just, it seemed like he never recuperated from that.
I think some people are really, really good at beating people up, but if they're in a tricky situation, or the roles reversed, they can cave in really quickly. So I think there's people, I've seen fights where guys are winning nearly all the way through, and as soon as they get reversed, they almost mentally quit because they can't hack the adversity. That when it gets really tough, they're good at being the hammer, but not good at being the nail. And I think in the story of a fight, if you're winning really well and you're on top, and then you get reversed, there's almost like you can see people almost sigh, like you can see the energy come out of them, and they can deal with that situation then.
Yeah,
it sucks when you're winning really well and someone sweeps you or something, and then you're on your back and they're hitting you. It's just like, oh, this is gonna hurt, or this is not where I want to be, and it is like it's hard to deal with. But it's like anything, you get those little setbacks, and you can't stop and think. You have to be straight back on it. Some of the guys I have training, sometimes you see them get taken down, and they'll get taken down, and they'll say, "Oh shit!" It's like that shouldn't even be crossing your mind. As you're going down, you should just be trying to get back up or scrambling. You shouldn't be thinking at all like that. You should be you should be competing in every single position, whether on your back or on your top. You should be trying to get the best position you can. But some people, you can see them break. So you see a lot of really skillful people crumble under a lot of pressure,
So the way to combat the thing, and let's say that theoretically correlates to life. You're kind of crushing it in their area, and then, and everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right?
Yeah.
Quote. But so something happens that you didn't expect, you theoretically get taken down. So what's the is the preparation for it to expect to be taken down? Like, I'm going to get taken down, and here's how I react when it does happen. Like, or how would you?
I think any time really when you have a plan, you have to expect the plan not to go to plan. So if you expect things expect things to go awry and problems to appear, if you're expecting that or you're prepared for it, then you can deal with it. But if it's a surprise to you, I think it can catch you off guard. Then you've got a problem. You should plan for the unexpected and plan to be in bad situations. And it's difficult to train for as well, because sometimes you get guys in the gym and you put them through, bad positional sparring. You put them on their back, and they have to fight their way up, and they might do that for rounds and rounds and rounds, just trying to get off their back and scramble from being in a bad position with someone at a superior game. And you can do that in the gym, but sometimes in a fight is a little bit different. So it's a really tough one to do, but you can prepare the best you can by putting people in bad situations. And people expect things to go wrong sometimes. I think whoever I was fighting, I'd always plan that I was fighting the best guy ever. Because I think, you think you take someone lightly, and it turns out to be tougher than you expected, that can get you, that can get you. So if you're always expecting it to be really, really tough, but you just go right through the guy, then that's just a bonus, But if you go in there expecting it to be easy, and it turns out to be something that's actually like a really, really difficult, that can catch people. I think that can catch people off guard. So you see these guys a lot, and they underestimate someone, and then they go in, and then they get humbled. You can't ever underestimate anyone. Just expect it to be really, really tough, I think, is the best way forward.
Okay. Hold up. Wait a minute. It's an interesting interview, no? Take a moment to click subscribe, follow, like, all those things. Please leave a comment in the comment section. Tell me what you think about this episode. Tell me what I could be doing better. I appreciate all the feedback. That's all I'm going to bother you with. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I'm a huge MMA fan. I'm fortunate enough to be watching it from the very beginning. I think I was like 12 or something maybe even younger than that when it first started. But anyway, so I've been following it for a long time. I've always admired it always felt heroic for me, just for a fighter, even to get into the cage, just to get to that journey. And the way you talk about the nerve-wracking sort of thing, I've heard other fighters talk about similar stuff, and the dreaming, like weeks prior to the event, thinking about it, all that kind of stuff. So what is it, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. I don't know. I'm bad with time, but I picked up ultra running. And so I know before like a big race, if it's 100 miles, let's say, I'm going through the same, I don't know if it's on the same level in terms of nerve-wracking, but I am going through having dreams about it, thinking about it constantly, my mind preparing myself for the possible, what if this happens? What if I twist my ankle here? What if I'm, all the different scenarios, kind of game planning it. And yeah, like one of the ways that helps me get through that is doing some type of mindset work, some meditation. I've found I kind of developed a specific performance orientated meditation. I guess the way I'd shorten it is I think about what could possibly go wrong, how I would navigate it. I process what that would look like if I navigate it correctly. But I always process on the end of it, the failure. I always process, okay, this is how it's going to feel if I failed. Like I'm going to have to go and tell my kids, people that know that I'm doing this are going to ask me how to go. And I'm envisioning me having that embarrassing conversation about how I screwed up or I failed or something. And like the cost is much less effective than what fighters are having to deal with. Is like, I failed by getting knocked out and like twitching on the ground, something completely embarrassing. But in the same thing, how you're saying, at the moment you're saying to yourself, I'm not doing this again. I'm done after this. And then the next day you're back and you're looking at the next fight. Same thing for a race, right? Like I'll finish during the race. I'm hating it, finish the race. And then I'm like back on this ultra sign up looking for the next race, seeing when I'm going to do it next. So yeah, it's interesting, the parallels.
Do you know what is the lead up, getting to the venue, having your hands wrapped, all that stuff is the tough bit. But as soon as my music would come on, and I got that far, and my music's coming on, and I'm walking out, I'll get like goosebumps. My hair will be standing on end. That's when I'd be excited. That's when I'd feel, right, actually, I really want to do this. But it would just be it's more the build up, the actual fight itself. I'd like it. It would just be a complete rush. I'd love the fight. It would just be getting there to the point where you're walking in. Or I would trick my brain really and say, because it is like it's that horrible feeling you get in your stomach that we all know, and you'd have butterflies. You'd feel really stressed. But by the time they're calling me in, or the runner will come and tell you you're next up, maybe you're just standing just off the stage or whatever. I'll say like in 25 minutes I'm going to be back here. So it's only time, isn't it? Time's going to pass. I could be sat somewhere doing nothing. I could be doing this. So in 25 minutes, this is all going to be over. So it's only a short time to really show everyone what you can do. So
yeah.
So I want to show everyone what I'm about, and I want to express myself and get in there and do a good job and show off my skills and show off what I think if I'm mentally strong, show people what I'm capable of, and show myself, test myself. put myself in that situation. But I'd always feel really excited when the music came on, and in the walkout, and when you're staring off each other on the side of the cage, getting ready to go, and they're pulling you into the middle, and you're facing off. Like then I'd be just like, I don't know if I'd enjoy it. I don't know if enjoyment's the right word, but I'd feel like really alive and ready to go. And it's a strange place to be. It's like everything's context, isn't it? It's like if you had a fight with someone out on the street, it's like, and you hurt someone, you can go to prison. The person's got family. They're going to think you're a really terrible person. They might have kids. They might have a mum. Or they will have a mum. They might have kids. But in that context, when you're in there, and it's all it's a consensual thing you're both sharing, you're both doing, and afterwards you're going to be friends. So it gets rid of a lot of the ugliness. But then you get that insane sort of competitiveness where you're going to just really just fight with your bodies, and you're going to see who's the better guy on the night. I just find that's the whole thing that drew me into it. And I think that's why people like watching MMA or like boxing, like combat sports, because it's just like in the context of that sport, it's just it's a beautiful thing to do, but it's insanely like intense as well.
Yeah, I've talked with Sam Alvey about this too. He talked about the introduction just being addicting. Just the addiction of the walkout was so heavy to him, and even now still, and as he's continuing to fight with combat karate, it's still the walkout is the thing that he can't let go of. That it's too much for it's so addictive. And the thing where you're talking about the timing, I'll be back here in 25 minutes. And this is very interesting because I hadn't thought about it in the context of fighting or MMA specifically, like what segmenting would look like. But there's this thing called segmenting, and they use this in Navy SEALs use this, and ultra runners will do this where it's like we don't think about, oh, I have 60 miles to go and I'm 40 miles into it. We think, when's the next aid station? The next aid station is in 5 miles. I can make it another 5 miles. I can get to another 5 miles. And you don't think about the grand thing. You think about the next thing that's achievable. And from a Navy SEAL perspective, like they'll talk about how it's like, I'm just making it to the next meal. I want to just get to the next meal. Eric Wrighton talked about this on this podcast here, who's got a really good book called Resilience. But yeah, he would talk about in Navy SEALs, it was just going to the next meal, making it to the next meal, You're not thinking about even sunset. You're not thinking about making it to the next morning. It's just to the next meal. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. The next 25 minutes, I'll be right back in this locker room.
Yeah. Which is nothing, is it? 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you just have to back yourself for 25 minutes. No quitting for 25 minutes. You just have to be like, there's people sometimes they might not even be the best guys, but they can switch on in the moment and give a better account of themselves sometimes just with that mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it feels tangible. It feels like it's right there. You've done this. You've trained so many times. 25 minutes is nothing compared to how many rounds you've prepared.
Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's a great insight. So moving along through some of your career, you talked about how you prepared for every fight as if it was the best guy in the world. So I want to talk about this Craig Allen, the weirdest trilogy ever, because Craig Allen, you dominated the guy in the first round of all 3 fights. So that's why I say it's the weirdest trilogy ever.
It's just with this guy, MMA, and sometimes MMA you get pullouts. So a couple of times on shows locally, I was supposed to fight someone else, and then they pulled out on the day or the day before. So they got this guy, and he's like a journeyman. So it's a tough one, it is, because you've been training for 12 weeks, and you're getting paid, and you've sold tickets, So it's either you cancel the whole thing or you have to bring someone in. So poor Craig Allen had to get beat up 3 times.
So Craig Allen's like, I need some money. I'll go in there.
That's the thing. That's the thing. And you know, if you look at that guy's record, you probably see a ton of UFC guys on his record as well.
Oh, you know, really?
Yeah. He's fought like some of the best guys in the UK. And
I saw his record was like 5-53, and of the 5 wins, they were against guys that were 0-10 combined. But I didn't look at the huge list.
He would have fought lots of good guys as well. So those guys are journeymen, and you'd rather not fight them. But sometimes it's a necessity if you it's either that or not fight and not get paid.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite tough. One of the times I was supposed to fight a guy, I won't mention his name, but he turned up 8 kilos overweight, or he messaged to say he was 8 kilos overweight and he wasn't going to make weight. And that was on the day of the weigh to the day before. So it's like that's tough. But even like, I'd still go in with the mindset that I'm fighting someone really, really good, just to make sure like nothing stupid happens. Because imagine losing against that guy.
Yeah.
You know,
being the one guy,
yeah. Not the greatest guy on my record.
Yeah, it was funny because it caught my attention. I was looking him up, and I'm like, this is because like in my knowledge of early MMA and some of the smaller regional scenes, it's like the guy, somebody pulls out last moment, and then the promoter's like, hey, you look like you got muscles and you work out. You want to come in and get a fight in?
But I just had some guys fight last weekend. So I was having a guy make his professional debut. And there was a guy on the same card who was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt who was having an amateur fight. Both their opponents didn't turn up. Both of the guys were from the same gym. So neither opponent turned up. So the promoter was just like, I said to the promoter, I said, why don't we just get them to fight each other? So my guy had to fight someone. It was like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt on like, I don't know, hours notice. Completely different plan.
Wow.
But he did it anyway, and he won, and he looked really good doing it. But it's just like, it turned out to be like good in the end because he fought someone really good and he got a good win. Sometimes on the smaller shows, sometimes you get a lot of pullouts. I think you get a lot of pullouts on the bigger shows as well. It's just that on the bigger shows, they got more money. They can bring someone decent in, or maybe they have a backup plan always. But it's a tough sport, MMA, in terms of pullouts, in terms of people getting injured. There's so many ways to get injured. There's so many fight cards that change, especially on the local level. It's a little bit harder, I think.
It was going to be one of the questions I was going to ask you, actually, because I noticed that when I look on Tapology, I think you had one where it's 3 straight cancellations. It was like cancellation.
Yeah,
so what is that like to prepare for the best guy in the world, like you said?
Yeah,
and then to have cancellation. How is that for you from a training perspective?
It's really difficult. It's really difficult to ever have to pull out, and it's really difficult if the other guy's pulled out. Like one time I was supposed to be fighting in Finland and it's like, I think it's called Fin Fight, and you're allowed to headbutt and stomp and stuff like this.
Wow.
And I think I did my last spar maybe on the Sunday, and I split my head open. And that one, because it was so deep, I had to pull out. I had another one it was going to be on my birthday. I was fighting, and I split my eye on the Monday in the fight week, and I had to get super glued above and below. And but it wasn't so deep. I just carried on and did that one because I needed the money for that one. So I did that one, and luckily I managed to submit him in the first round. But it's a tough one with injuries. It's a tough one to decide to pull out, and I think it has to be a personal choice, really. It's like I fought once with a broken rib and got TKO'd, and I told myself after that, like, if I'm too impaired to fight, I've got to pull out. I've got to be smart, because no one really cares about afterwards if you're telling everyone you got a broken rib. No one really cares. It sounds like an excuse.
Yep.
So I think you've got to be like, everyone will go in there and they'll be a little bit injured, a little bit banged up. Sometimes not, but mostly I think people are a little bit, they have a few little niggles going on. If you have something serious, I think you just have to after pull out, and I think pull outs are part of the game. I think MMA is such a rough sport. You get so many injuries, and I know you hear some guys saying they've never pulled out of a fight. They must be pretty lucky to have got through that without any injuries. I think that the older I get as well, because I started quite old, maybe I was a little bit more prone to injuries. I had a few neck issues, and so sometimes I think it's a smarter thing to do if you have to.
So let's talk about your biggest win. Who would you say? Because I could see the biggest name that you got, but who would you say is your biggest win?
I don't know if biggest or what were the wins I was most impressed with myself. I think for me, fighting when I was 48, and I dislocated my elbow in like 5 months before in a fight, and dislocated it really badly. It took them a long time to get back in, and it sort of compromised my arm. And then I came back from that and fought 5 months later, and I fought a guy who was not amazing, but he was decent. And we watched some of his fights, and I was going up in weight. He was a lot younger. He looked like, even when he lost, he looked like he'd done a really good job. He looked really strong. He had a really good arm bar as well, which is obviously I'd hurt my arm, and I took that one. But I think from losing 5 months before and not really performing well at all, to going into that one, I think I was so fired up, and I was really like just on it for training and for the fight. I went in just like ready to do a really good job, and it just went perfect. So I just took his back straight away and choked him unconscious. That for me was probably one of the best times I fought in terms of my performance. And then probably my biggest win was against Akira Coruscant in Sweden. And at the time, that was probably, I think it was back in 2011, and he hadn't been beat for like 3 years, and I think he was on a 8-fight win streak or something like that. And I'd heard he was supposed to beat me, and then he was signed for the UFC. So it's like I fought a lot of people on their home soil. So I go like Sweden's quite far away from the UK, so you go to their hometown and fight them. And really, these shows, they don't want you to win fights. They pay you good money, but they want you to lose for their boy to carry on. And I remember being so fired up for that fight, and I was insanely fit. I remember being in the best shape, probably the best shape of my life. And he was a real tough guy. He could punch really hard. He had really good wrestling. But that was just a fight where I was so fit, and I think maybe he underestimated me. And I just and it got into like a real punch out, and I caught him with a lot of good shots. I remember we in the rules meeting the day before, the referee said, if you drop the person and you land 6 punches, we're going to stop it. But what they meant really is if he dropped me and landed 6 punches, we're going to stop it, because I dropped him and I hit him about 50 times before they stopped the fight, you know. But that was probably that's probably my biggest win in terms of like where like world ranking and stuff like that.
Yeah, name recognition. Yeah, because he went on. I mean, he fought some big name. He went on to UFC, fought Andy Ogle, Dennis Bermudez, Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway. He went on to fight some huge names. You know.
Yeah, I think he was training with he was training in New York, I think, for a long time. He was a really good guy, really good fighter. But yeah, he was a good guy. But I fought a few really good people really quite quickly, because starting my career when I was like 35. Within like a few months, I was like 7-0. So within 10 months, I got to 7-0. And my 7th guy was a guy who was the Cage Warriors champion at the time. I think I was a white belt at jiu-jitsu at that point, and he was a black belt. And beating him, that was a really big win for me at the time. Even some of the losses, I think, really were so close. After I beat Akira, I went back there and fought a guy called Martin Svensson. It was really good, and I thought I should have got the nod, but when you're away from home and you're in the guy's hometown, it's one of these as well where I think when you look, like, things are so objective in terms of winning or losing. But when you go out there and you know you fought really well, like it might be a split decision. One of the judges gives it to you, one of them gives it to them. The other one just hanging on the balance of one round, and maybe they go to them. Maybe the fans were cheering them a little bit more, you know. So then you come away with a loss, but if it was 3 different judges, it might have been a win. So it's such a weird, like, objective way of looking at it, when really it's like if you perform really well and you're happy with how you fought, you know. So I had some fights where I lost, but I came away and I performed really well.
Is there a better way of doing the judging system? I know there's talks of, like, you know, letting the fighters know what the scorecard looks like going into the 3rd round, and like there's been things where people have suggested things, but any thoughts that you have?
I just think when you get sport, and when you have, the more rules you have, the more you can manipulate the rules, and people can play the system. You know, I just think, I mean, do you remember how Pride was? It'd be 1 10-minute round, you know, and then 1 5-minute round. I think things like that, where people are trying to finish each other properly. I think then MMA changed to people holding each other down. I think it's become a little bit more like it used to now, where it's really scored highly if you try and finish the guy, or if you really wobble the guy, it's really scored high, and you're doing lots of damage. I just think to make it more realistic and to make it a better sport, if they score highly when you're close to finishing someone, that if you wobble them, it should score really highly. So people are actually going out there trying to knock each other out, or trying to submit each other, rather than going to stall for points, or to hold someone down for 15 minutes. But I think it's just, whatever point system you have, there's always going to be a problem with it, and you just have to accept that, you know. But it's just like sometimes someone wins and someone loses, but it's so close that it could easily have gone the other way. But one guy goes off a loser and one goes off a winner.
Yeah.
And then the way the fans in the media look at it, there's the guy lost, but it's some fights they lose, but they're not really losers, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially even in fights where you see someone get knocked out.
Yeah.
But it was a heck of a fight. And then they find someone finally lands the knockout blow. You're still like, you're like, wow, that was like,
yeah, it could have been
that's a loss,
one of the best fights ever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's your favorite fighter?
So I hold on to the positive memories of BJ Penn.
Yeah.
I don't think about the, like, years later where he's like probably struggling with some alcoholism and different things, and getting into bar fights in Hawaii and stuff. If we can put a period at the end of a sentence at some point in his career and call that his career, then I loved BJ Penn. I think his walkout there's no better walkout on the planet than BJ Penn coming out. And locally, Uriah Faber is from where I'm from. So Uriah Faber was always a fan, loved watching him in WEC just dominate.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah. And then there's different guys. I mean, I can go on and on. I was a big Mark Munoz fan, which was cool enough to have him on my show here. So yeah, a lot of guys.
Who's your favorite guy just now? Who would you turn on the most
right now?
To watch? Yeah. Not even champions, like the person you'd want to watch fight.
Yeah. It's hard not to tune into a Justin Gaethje fight.
Yeah, definitely.
Justin Gaethje, just because he's got that dog in him, and he's probably one of those guys that I don't know if he's ever pulled out of a fight. I don't know. I think he might be, in some ways, kind of unintelligent in his approach, and that makes you like him even more, you know?
Yeah.
And so, Max Holloway is another guy where you're like, okay, if Max Holloway's fighting, you got to watch it. So yeah.
They're two guys that just put everything on the line, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
And they're trying to finish the fight. They're trying to knock the guy out. You know? There's a lot of machismo. You know? And I mean, Gaethje, I think Gaethje's amazing. Max Holloway's amazing. And then going back to sort of looking at boxing as well, that's the sort of type of fighters I like. I like fighters that get in there and really try and do the job, try and finish the guy. I like people that finish fights, you know, or go out there to try and finish fights. Make it exciting, you know.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think the stalling thing, like you said, everyone hates it. I think sometimes the fans get too too short with their fuse of letting a guy work on the ground if he's a jiu-jitsu guy, you know. And sometimes referees follow the fans' boos and pull them off too quickly. But yeah, you can clearly see when someone's just stalling and they don't, and that's frustrating to see as a fight fan. Of the losses where you said there were some close ones, maybe a card didn't go your way, a judge didn't go your way. What would you say was your hardest loss? The loss that just kind of sticks with you.
I got TKO'd in like about 25 seconds, I think, by a guy called Freddie Fernandez. And I went up to Edinburgh, which is my hometown. So I had like family in the crowd. And that's the one where I had the broken rib. That's the one where I had a broken rib, and I knew my family were coming, so I didn't want to pull out, and I couldn't spar, but I got really, really fit, and I wasn't sparring, and then I didn't do the weight cut very well. I was still not really sure how to do the weight cut back in those days, and then worse than that was how to put the food back in. I kind of got that wrong, and but I went out, and I was just overly nervous, and I can remember like nothing happened for 20 seconds, and some people started booing. And I reacted that by going forward and I just walked straight onto a right hand. But that was the worst. That was the worst ever. I remember I stayed in bed for a week after that, just really upset. That was a tough one to take. But then you have to come back stronger, and you have to find a way through it. You have to learn from those experiences, so that never happens again. But that was a really tough one to take, and you can't help but take it really personally as well, you know. But then you can focus on it, or you can just think, okay, how can I get better? What can I do to make sure nothing like that ever happens again? So I got so much more patient after that. And one thing, I'd never react to the crowd in that way again. But yeah, that was the hardest one. Have my arm break was bad. That was a bad one because, like, I felt it go, and I was still trying to figure out how I could win the fight, but my arm is literally just hanging by my side, sort of thing. That was a tough one, and dealing with my arm after that was hard as well. Getting it put back in, doing with physio and stuff, that was a really tough one to take. But I found that the good thing with MMA is if you lose, you've always, you've got a chance to get that, to go back out and fight again, and to really, really like do something different. So you get a second chance. So I think every time I lost, I'd usually come back with a really, really good win. And so you can bounce back and you can come back stronger. I think that's just a really nice metaphor for life, isn't it? When things go wrong, there's a way you can do it better. But I think sometimes when you lose, it can sort of make you laser focused on the next fight. And if maybe I think it can maybe it makes you a little bit less nervous, or it makes you less complacent, or just more hungry to win. So I think like every time I would lose like that, I would come back with a real sort of hunger to win and just be so focused, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it makes me think about guys that don't get that win back, Yeah. I think Sam Alvey might have just had his UFC record for longest loss streak broken by Tony Ferguson or something.
But how sweet would it have been for Sam to win that Karate Combat?
Yeah.
How sweet that would have felt. So good.
Yeah. Yeah. And he did. So Sam Alvey taking the heavyweight championship at Karate Combat was pretty big comeback for him.
Yeah.
Being able to do that. But yeah, it does make you think like, gosh, man, like guys like Tony Ferguson and who are like just great fighters. But they, what do you think that is? Do you think for guys like let's use Tony Ferguson, for example, I guess, do you think like that's somebody where it would be good and maybe would have been good for him just to say, I understand the drive, but probably time to retire? Or you're just like, nah, man, keep doing what you love. Like how do you feel with that?
Nah, retire.
Retire.
If you're getting beaten up like that, either leave the UFC and then go down a level, because the level's too high for him there. So if you want to do it, as you get older, like obviously you can't fight the same guys at a really high level, they're younger because it's going to be painful, you know. So Tony Ferguson, and the house always wins, doesn't it? The UFC always wins. So with Tony Ferguson, they can keep on using them and abusing them really, and giving them to the next guy, and they'll get as much money as they possibly can. And if he wants to do it, he's a willing participant, isn't he? But he could be safe from himself, I think. But then it's a personal thing and it's a personal choice if you want to do it. Do you remember when Chuck Liddell was getting knocked out all the time?
Well, yeah.
It's painful to watch when you watch someone that's been amazing and been so
Yeah.
good. Because Tony Ferguson, how long was his win streak?
I think he had 11 wins in a row.
Something like that,
Off
wasn't
the
it?
top
He
of my
was
head,
kicking
yeah.
everyone's ass.
Yeah.
And then he just couldn't win a fight to save his life. And it'd just be all different things that happen to him all the time. And it'd just be, I think, once you're losing like that, you could lose 3 different ways in 3 fights. And it's just because you haven't really got it at that level anymore.
Yeah.
But I mean, hats off to Tony Ferguson, because he's been an amazing fighter, hasn't he? But yeah, it does. It's a shame. It happens to a lot of fighters. They just keep on going. And then they lose a lot of fights. It's in boxing, happens in MMA. I think when he's on his deathbed, you know, he's probably going to just be glad he carried on going, you know, and he kept on trying, rather than worry about his record so much, you know. I think, again, it's that objective idea of the record, because he wants to keep on doing it, and he thinks he can win, but he keeps on getting beat, but he's still trying, and he's still training, and maybe he just loves to train and he loves to do it. You know, I'm sure he would love to win, but he keeps on taking that risk. And I think that's why people like it. Do you remember when Volkanovski got knocked out by Islam?
No.
When Volks got knocked out by Islam?
I didn't watch it. No, I didn't watch
Right,
that
so
one, no.
he got knocked out by Islam. I remember, like, people were saying he shouldn't have taken that fight and it was too risky and stuff. But this is a guy that's taken risks all the way through his life to the point where he become featherweight champion of the world, and then he fought for the lightweight championship. So all these guys are really high risk takers, aren't they? So it's hard to. So I think some of them, for them to retire when they should, is like it's pretty rare. I think it's rare. It's rare in boxing and it's rare in MMA. Usually people just go on far too long because that's in their nature to gamble and to bet on themselves. But yeah, as a fan, you just don't want to see it, do you?
Yeah, it's like if you're a big fan of him, you hate to see it. You like to see, like who am I thinking of? Miller. I can't think of his first name right now. Jim Miller, right? You like to see Jim Miller keep going out there and racking up wins. Like, yes, dude, like I love it. But okay, so I guess the biggest name that I saw in terms of, you know, the biggest win you had, we talked about, the biggest name I saw was Brad Pickett on your resume. So how is that to see you fight someone like a Brad Pickett, and even though it didn't go your way in that fight, and you can talk about the fight if you want, but to fight someone like Brad Pickett and then to see him then go up into the upper echelon of, you know, the bantamweight division and the UFC and all that, like how is that to see that with one of your former opponents?
You just always want the best for the guys you fought. Really, he was a quality opponent, and it was a good fight. It was really close until maybe the last 2 minutes. He probably won it by hitting me with a flying knee. But yeah, he's a really tough guy, and he's obviously really, really driven, and he's got no quit in him. And he done really well for himself. He based himself out in the States, and he bet on himself, and he backed himself, and he put everything into it, and he's done really, really well. And one of my guys just fought one of his guys, an amateur, like a month ago. So he's got a really good team in the UK now. But I think when you see someone you fought do well, I think it's better for me if he's doing well and he's winning, you know. So
that's what I would always assume too.
Yeah. Fair play to him. I had a match with him in grappling, but with punches. So it's a really strange rule set where it was a 10-minute submission only match. This was like when I was 46 or 47. So it's submission only, but we had MMA gloves on, and on the floor we had to hit each other. And it's just like it's a really,
Yeah.
it's like combat jujitsu. And that
Yeah.
that just went 10 minutes. It was 10 minutes of like us sort of wrestling each other stood up rather than any punches happening. But I always really, like after I fought Brad, I always wanted a rematch, and I was always chasing the rematch. And after he left the UFC, we nearly got on ACB, but then ACB went bust or they went out of business. But it was pretty close. But it would have been nice to have a rematch with him in MMA. But when the first time I fought him, I think I'd just been fighting in MMA for like 18 months. And I got this like decent record straight away, but it's such a short time, and I was already like fighting against someone like him. And I think I'd started in December, and then I fought him. It must have been about 18 months there. I think it was like May 2008, and then from just like starting my career locally, and then before I knew it, it was like I was on TV, on Sky Sports, and it was in a massive arena in Birmingham. So it was just a surreal experience of like, okay, this is going on now. It was a good fight. I enjoyed that fight.
It's hard to get over the fact that you didn't start training MMA. Now you did have some combat sports foundation, like you said, in boxing and judo, but and I thought watching some of your highlights, I thought you had for sure a wrestling background because your takedowns are always like clean and crisp, but yeah, so it seemed, anyway, for you to start at 33 years old to begin this new career is incredible. And then to continue to push that out until I think you said 48 years old.
I had my last
one,
your last 50. Fight? 50 was my last.
You had the last one at 50.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And when was that? When was that?
That was 21. That was like November 21.
Okay. 21.
Yeah, that's the last one was at 50. And I think I just did it for like a 50th birthday present for myself, where I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to just have another one, just get in shape. And the opponent, it was like, what was he? Maybe like 6 wins and 8 losses or something like that, or 8, maybe 6 and 11, maybe, or 7 and 11. So he was all right, and he'd been on Cage Warriors, and he'd won a title and stuff, but he was beatable. But he was a lot younger than me, and it's really difficult to train for a fight when you're 50. It's really hard, you know. So it's like I probably did 5 sparring sessions for that. I done like lots of rolling that, but actually 5 striking sessions. And if I got hit too much, I'd just quit. I'd just say, look, I'm not doing any more today. So I had to get into really good shape. And by the last week, I was doing 5 5s, and I felt like in awesome shape. But yeah, it's really tough when you're 50 because it's a rough sport, and you carry a lot of injuries. You get a lot of knocks. But I really badly wanted to do it. I think a lot of people thought it was crazy for doing it at the time. I really wanted to do it, and I really enjoyed it. It's probably, although the body gets banged up and gets a little bit weaker, I think the mind can get stronger, and the way you approach it. And it's like I did it, and it was more like research. I felt like I was making me like a better coach, understanding the process of fighting more. Try and get my mindset right, be like really calm and relaxed and composed, and then try a few like techniques I hadn't tried before. So it was really interesting doing it. I felt really good for the fight. So yeah, I think because I fought from 35, and I think I retired the first time at 43, and I was still fighting. It's still like a good level when I was 43. I think maybe when I was 42, I fought a guy called Rob Whiteford up in Scotland who beat me on points and then was in the UFC. And then I fought a guy called Anzor, who's a really good wrestler from Chechnya over in KSW. I think I was either 40 or 41 when I fought him. So I was fighting these really good guys that are like pretty old. But then I retired at 43, and then I decided to have some more fights when I was 46. And obviously I had to bring the level down to the guys I was fighting. But then I really enjoyed those fights. I really enjoyed the preparation, and I think I got like a better sense of like how to think about fighting, how to approach fighting, how to be calm, how to really focus on just preparation, how to not be nervous. So yeah, I think I learned a lot from fighting later on.
What kind of tools or like from a physical standpoint, but also from a mentality standpoint, do you, or have you found and that you might coach with your fighters in terms of longevity, in terms of doing something that you love from an athletic perspective and still be able to try to peak athletically in spite of your age? Like, what kind of tools do you have?
I think when we first started, we would just like spar like 100% and trying to knock each other out. So the guys I coach now, I have them like the intensity is so much lower. It's more play a lot of skill games, do a lot of situational sparring, look after the body more, maybe train a little bit less, not quite as intensely, but and then when you get a fight, we ramp up the intensity, and then know how to back off a little bit as well. Try and stay away from just repetitive injuries and try and look after your body a little bit more. I think people know how to eat a little bit better. Maybe like, you can do saunas, like cold plunges, you do lots of different things, but it's like if you have a car and you drive it around like an idiot, you're always going to have problems. You can keep on taking it to the mechanic. So with your body, if you don't smash it around as badly as you from training, you won't even have to look after yourself as well. You just have to get that level of intensity right. It's a tough one because when you wrestle, it's really hard on your body. When you do MMA sparring, it's really hard. I see people they see little injuries all the time. But then how can you minimize the risk of injuries? You can't take them away, but you can try and minimize things. So I think really just smart sparring with people your own size, sparring with people that are maybe a little bit less skillful than you, maybe the same as you, and maybe a little bit more skillful than you. So you get different phases where maybe you're practicing someone that you're better than, so you can just practice a few things without hurting them, and work on a few submissions you've been working on. It's usually with the people that are the same as you, the toughest sparring, really, because you're competing really hard. And if you go with someone better than you, you're trying to match their pace maybe, but if they're better than you, as long as they're trying to look after you and look out for you and not be like a bad sparring partner. So I think where do I see most injuries is probably MMA sparring and wrestling sparring. So then how can you do that as safely as possible? I think little situational sparring is good. So we're just looking at like slight positions, and then how many rounds should you do? Because there's a lot of people watch like UFC Embedded, and it's like they watch Khabib do this or they watch this, and they get like these little edited videos of where people are running up mountains and training nonstop. But the actual over in Russia, the intensity of their wrestling is actually lower, and they don't just grind and grind. They're really clever how they do it, and they've got really good sports science. I think the idea of just grinding is not a good way to go about it, because you end up with an injury and you get overtrained, you hurt yourself, you're setting yourself up for failure, really. But it's a tough one because it's such a tough sport, and you want to go intensely sometimes as well because you want to test people. So it's a real balancing act. But me, I just always try and now I eat really, really well. I drink a lot. I drink water. At the moment, that's all I'm drinking at the moment. It's just water. I've given up everything else. Don't drink tea, coffee, anything. I just drink water. So I think you can just try and look after yourself, look after your body. Back when I was first starting, when I was really getting into it, if I did anything that would hurt my body and niggle it, I would just remove it from my program. So any kind of weights or anything like that sort of niggle my back, I just got rid of anything like that. So I was always just thinking, okay, what's the risk reward of doing this? And if it's too much risk, I just have to eliminate it. Like I was saying, the hardest thing really is sparring, because people can get hurt when you're sparring. But I would spar usually with the better guys I would spar with, the less chances of me getting hurt and them getting hurt. So especially if I spar with guys my own weight, spar with trusted training partners, so you know what they're doing. It's like sometimes you go with someone new and there's like a little bit of ego, and it's like, who's going to win this? And it gets too rough. And you're both trying to prove something. But if you're going with someone you go with regularly, you both know each other's level, you can just bring it back a little bit, and you're trying to be careful with each other as well, so you don't hurt each other. But it's a tough sport not to get injured in. But you can try and minimize it as much as possible. Other than that, the idea of longevity, I just think, is a choice as well. You might have like a traumatic knee injury that stops you from doing MMA, but maybe you could box. You could choose to do some boxing, or you might have you might have a bad back. But at the moment I've got my back's always bad, but it's been bad for years, and I've just always managed to find a way to do it still. So I think it's really a choice. When I dislocated my elbow, I can remember everyone told me to never do it again, to stop. But it's just a choice, and I'm just really careful how I use that arm, and I won't let anyone near it. So there's always ways and there's always methods, but really, you can do the sport for a long time. But I think it's down to choosing to do it even when it hurts.
Yeah. I think that's probably a proper definition of resilience. Just what you said. It comes down to choosing to do it even though it hurts.
Yeah.
That's resiliency in of itself. Well, Paul, I'm so grateful to have you on the show. I keep talking about this stuff forever, but I thank you so much for coming on the
mate. Thank you for having me.
I mean, a great conversation. I loved it. So thanks so much, dude.
Thank you very much.
Have you on. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab along with my social media links.
We're chasing shadows in the light, embracing failures, we take flight. Within the darkness we find our sight. The Patina'd podcast, our beacon bright. Rust is grit, not decay. We're chasing shadows in the light, embracing failures, we take flight. Within the darkness we find our sight. The Patina'd podcast, our beacon bright. We're chasing shadows in the light, embracing failures, we take flight. Within the darkness we find our sight. The Patina'd podcast, our beacon bright. Scar tissue woven into grace, each imperfection a familiar face. We wear our struggles, no trace erase. In vulnerability we find our place. Rust is grit, not decay. We're chasing shadows in the light, embracing failures, wings take flight. Within the darkness we find our sight. The Patina'd podcast, our beacon bright. We're chasing shadows in the light, embracing failures, wings take flight. Within the darkness we find our sight. The Patina'd podcast, our beacon bright.